Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. So today I had a question that said, what happened to the U.S. volunteers in the Canadian Army during World War I? So my answer to that question is, it depends. And what it depends on is what they were doing and how well they were hidden and whether they wanted to do anything about it if they could. And by it depends, for example, the aviators who served with the Canadian Air Forces generally transferred to the American Air Forces. Those individuals that were in ambulance corps, American ambulance corps, prior to the war, generally transferred into Army ambulance corps. So there may be the opportunity for those in Canadian ambulance corps to also transfer into American ambulance corps. I don't know if there was I believe there was the opportunity, but I can't find it, that there was the opportunity that once the U.S. entered the war, that those in the Canadian Expeditionary Forces that were Americans could transfer, but I don't know why they would do that, because they were already comfortable where they were at. So I don't think there was a forced effort to move Americans out of the Canadian Expeditionary Force and into the American Expeditionary Force. I think they pretty much left everything alone, since the truth of the matter is, for the most part, neither government did anything but ignore the enlistment of, I'll call them foreigners, in either the American Expeditionary Force or the Canadian Expeditionary Force. But one of the things that you can do is you can go to a very interesting set of web pages, a database that's online. One of the things that you can do is go out to the Canadian Great War Project, CanadianGreatWarProject.com. And basically this is a database of individuals who served in the Canadian Expeditionary Force between 1914 and 1918. And remember, the war ends on November 11th, 1918, if I have my dates straight. If we go into this database that's here, there across the top you'll see home, search, diaries, Canada at war and about, and how to contribute. So our interest today is in the search field, and basically it will allow you to find a veteran, and you can search all, but you can search by surname, forename, date of birth, location, normalized occupation, attested occupation. The way you join the Canadian military was with a set of attestation documents, and those can be found in Ottawa. Religion, date of enlistment, location enlistment, regimental number, regiment rank, battle wounded, killed, POW camp location, buried, date of death, and cause of death. So you can search by all those categories. So if we were to search by location born and typed in United States, you would get one entry. And the reason is because this entry in the database happens to be messed up. It should say Longview, Texas, USA. So what you want to look for is location born, and when you do USA, and search, you get a whole bunch. 8,419. Now, there is no data field that says American or Canadian. There is the assumption that anybody here is, quote, a Canadian. But as you can see, here's close to 9,000 individuals, and there were about 40,000 individuals who were American who actually served. But these are the people that have birthplaces in the United States. Now recognize that a lot of U.S. citizens are not necessarily born in the United States, but they're still U.S. citizens. you can see by looking at this list here that some of them have a date of death. And for example, Oscar Theodore Anson has a date of death of 1922, which is long after the war. So it means probably that he stayed in, it may mean that he stayed in the service and eventually died in the service, or that he was hospitalized due to wounds that he might have acquired while in the service, and he eventually dies in 1922. So if we continue, it doesn't work so well when you continue to lose location. But if you look for cause of death, and that cause of death is, let's say died of wounds, and then add a search constraint of location born USA. Do it a little backwards. And then search. You'll get a list of 139 results, 6 pages. So these are individuals born in the United States who died of wounds. And if you look at the dates of these deaths, September 30th, 1918, you recognize that these people were not assimilated back into U.S. forces, that they remained in Canadian forces. And my sense is that if they wanted to remain, they were allowed to remain. If they wanted to leave, they probably were allowed to leave. So that's my sense of what actually happened. But the truth of the matter is, I can't find anything that tells me what actually happened. So you can tell, if I were to go and do this again and find anyone born in the United States with a surname of Scott, just because I happen to like that surname. So let's search for a specific individual. Scott is his surname, and his forename is Charles. And let's see if I can find one of those. And we find a Charles Scott who's born in, well, there's 89, almost 9,000 Charles Scotts. Well, actually, that looks like people with, it looks like there's more to it than that the search doesn't work like you would like it to. So let's back up a little bit. So let's look for someone whose surname is Scott, whose forename is Charles. Let's look for a person whose surname is Scott. Add a search constraint. Forename is Charles. Add another search constraint. Location born USA. And we have one. So here we have Charles Scott from Wabash, Indiana. He's born the 21st of February, 1874. He's a farmer, and he enlists in 1915. He's in the 39th Battery, and he's a private. So my recommendation would be that you go to the archives in Ottawa, and the Canadian Archives, and you see if you can get a copy of his papers. And his papers will tell you when he was discharged from the 39th Battery and where he was discharged to. Was he discharged to home, or was he discharged to an American unit? So that's a good place to start. But having said that, let's look at 12.9.15 as a added search constraint, because I have a feeling. Let's look at date of enlistment, people from the USA, and search, and look at all the people on that date who enlisted that were born in the U.S. 16 of them. And there is, look at that, a Hugh J. Scott from Wabash, Indiana, who's 2 years younger than Charles, who's a general farmer who enlisted on the same day. And he ends up in the 17th Reserve Battalion, and he ends up being a sergeant. Dollars to donut, my hypothesis is they're brothers. So you can see another way of, you can look for them by enlistment date. You can look at them by name. You can look at them by place of birth. So my recommendation is that you just go into the Canadian Great War Project and you play around a little bit if you've got an American who was serving in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. And that will give you some clues, because you'll end up with what unit he was in. And once you have the unit and the name and his date of enlistment and those kind of things, you should be able to track down his service. Let me know what you find out. This has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy, and we've been talking about the Canadian Great War Project. And anybody who has a specific name for somebody who wants to be searched, and you have difficulties, we can work on that and see if we can figure it out how to get more information. You all have a great day.